In today's lecture, I'll talk about what data science is. I'll talk about how we perform data science, how we perform data preparation, and the roles that we have in data science. So what is data science? Well, according to O'Reilly, data science aims to derive knowledge from big data efficiently and intelligently. Data science encompasses the set of activities, tools, and methods that enable data-driven activities in science, business, medicine, and government. Here's another definition of data science. Data science combines three different skills: hacking skills, math and statistics knowledge, and domain expertise skills. Now, this leads to some interesting intersections. For example, between hacking skills and math and statistics knowledge, we have traditional machine learning. So this is the case where you have somebody who can apply algorithms at scale to large amounts of data and understand both the algorithms and the results that they see from those algorithms. Combining the skills of math and statistics knowledge with domain expertise, we have traditional research. So this is where someone in a specific domain is able to collect some data and then perform detailed analyses on that data, understanding both the analytical process and the results that they get. The danger zone is someone who has hacking skills and domain expertise skills. In this case, you have someone who's able to collect a lot of domain-specific knowledge, apply algorithms to that at scale, but doesn't really understand either the algorithms or the results that they get from applying those algorithms. So if you remember the cautionary tale from last time about the Facebook analysis, that's a case where someone applied hacking skills to a large amount of domain-specific information and yielded a result that they didn't really understand. The combination of hacking skills, math and statistics knowledge, and domain expertise yields data science. Someone who can apply domain-specific knowledge at very large scale while understanding both the algorithms that they're applying and the results that they get from applying those algorithms. One way to understand what data science is to contrast it with other domains. So let's contrast it first with databases. In databases, every data value is precious because our data values are things like bank records or personnel records or census or medical records. We don't want to lose or corrupt any of that. In data science, our data is cheap because it's things like online clicks or GPS logs or tweets or tree sensor readings. We can lose a value and it won't affect our end results. And this is because in data science, the volume of data that we have is absolutely massive, whereas in databases, it's fairly modest. Databases have some very important properties: consistency, error recovery, and auditability. Consistency means we always want to make sure that our database has the correct information. Error recovery means that if the database server fails or the disk fails, we want to make sure that we can recover all of the data and not lose any of it. Auditability means that we want to make sure we can know who made a change and when they made that change. In contrast, the primary properties and priorities for data science are speed, availability, and query richness. We want to get answers as quickly as possible. We always want our system to be available to give us those quick answers, and we want to be able to ask very complex questions. Now, databases are very strongly structured. They have a schema that very clearly defines all of the fields that we store in that database and the types of those fields. In data science, we may have no structure, or it may be very weak structure. We may simply just have a text file that contains our information. Now, databases have very important properties of transactions and ACID semantics. Transactions mean that we're able to control how the database changes its state. And we do that using the ACID properties. ACID stands for atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. Atomicity means that when we make a change to the database, it happens completely or not at all. Consistency means our database is always in a consistent or correct state. And isolation means that if we have multiple things occurring within that database at the same time, they're isolated from one another. Durability means that once we have made a change to the database, we guarantee that that change will survive, even if the system should crash or should fail. In data science, instead, we have the properties like things like the CAP theorem. The CAP theorem stands for consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. And the CAP theorem says that we can have any two of those properties, but we cannot have all three of those properties. So for example, imagine that we have two systems that are interconnected and sharing data, and we want to make sure that those systems are consistent with one another because they have the same data in them. So they're connected. Well, if that connection is broken, then changes made to one of the systems will not be apparent in the other system. So if we want to have a system that's consistent overall, we can't make that system be available and tolerate partitions. So you can apply each of these consistency, availability, and partition tolerance properties and look at them, and you can only have two of them at the same time. You can't have all three. The second aspect of data science is that we're interested in eventual consistency. So in these two systems that are the same system but are distributed, we don't require that they be perfectly consistent all of the time. They could be slightly out of sync with one another, but eventually they will be consistent. So as an example, imagine that you have a friend in England and you're in the United States, and you add that person as a friend on Facebook. Well, Facebook's distributed. So it means it might take a few seconds before they notice that they've been added as a friend. The final property that we want to look at in contrasting databases is the realizations, the query languages that we can use. Databases store their data using the structured query language, or SQL. In data science, we store using NoSQL data stores, and there are many different open source data stores that provide the NoSQL environment. And the key properties of the NoSQL environment is they allow for much more rich queries than we have in the SQL environment. Another contrast that we have with databases is that if you think about it, databases are all about collecting data and then querying that data. But that data represents the past, so we're really querying the past. Whereas with data science, we collect data and then we want to use that to query the future. So this is very related to business analytics. Because in business analytics, the goal is to obtain actionable insight in complex environments. The challenge that we have both in data science and in business analytics is that we have vast amounts of disparate, unstructured data, and we have to provide a result in a very limited amount of time. So for example, trying to decide, do I show someone a particular ad or not? So I want to know, are they likely to click on that ad? Are they likely to click on that ad and purchase that product? Or, what related products do I show someone? Or, at a supermarket, what coupon do I print out when they're checking out? We can contrast data science with scientific computing. So here on the left, we have a climate model example as a case of scientific modeling, and on the right, we have a system being developed at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs that's designed to determine whether a particular image from a telescope contains a supernova or not. In scientific modeling, we build physics-based models, and we use those to derive properties of our data. In a data-driven approach, we build general inference engines instead of these physics-based models. So here on the right, we have a general purpose machine learning classifier that's being trained to recognize images that contain supernovas. In scientific modeling, everything is structured around the problem that we're trying to solve. Whereas in a data-driven approach, we're using general purpose or things that are not related to the structure of the problem. Scientific modeling is mostly deterministic and quite precise. Whereas in a data-driven approach, we build statistical models that handle this true randomness, and they can deal with unmodeled complexity. So in the case of the climate model, we have to understand exactly how particles in the atmosphere are going to interact. But in the case of detecting supernovas, we're simply taking a picture that contains pixels representing photons received from a telescope, by a telescope. So here, there's tremendous complexity in trying to determine whether this image is an image of a supernova or not. Trying to come up with a physics-based model to determine that would be truly a massive undertaking. Instead, we use a much simpler approach using these statistical models that tries to detect whether the supernova is present or not. And there's going to be a degree of accuracy or, alternatively, inaccuracy in those results. Scientific modeling runs on supercomputers or on high-end cluster computers. These clusters can cost over $1 billion. In contrast, data science runs on cheaper computer clusters like Amazon EC2. We can contrast data science with traditional machine learning. In traditional machine learning, it's all about developing novel individual models. Whereas in data science, we'll explore many models, we'll build them, we'll tune them, we'll build hybrids of models. Models are considered very inexpensive. In traditional machine learning, it's all about proving mathematical properties of the models. Whereas in data science, we want to understand the empirical properties of the models. That is, how do they perform in practice, both in terms of accuracy and in terms of actual wall clock time. How quickly do they run? In traditional machine learning, we take a small, clean data set, and that's what we use to validate our results and build our models. In data science, we're dealing with massive amounts of dirty data. We have no control over what's in the data set and what's not in the data set in terms of cleanliness. And so we need tools that can handle this dirty data. In traditional machine learning, the end result is publishing a paper. Whereas in data science, we want to take actionable, we want to use this to build systems that can take actions. So one way to look at data science is how we can use data science to find data scientists. So Kaggle is a website where people can upload various types of problems that they want data scientists to solve. So here are some examples. And we can see there's one predicting West Nile virus in Chicago. There's another one to predict restaurant revenue. And data scientists can form teams and then compete to come up with the best solutions to these problems. And if they come up with the best solution, they win a prize being cash. Now, most data scientists don't participate in Kaggle because they're trying to win money. Rather, they participate for the bragging rights of being able to say they came up with the best possible algorithm. So now let's look at how we perform data science. We'll do this by first looking at the view of 3 data science experts. Jim Gray, who was a Turing Award-winning database researcher, Ben Fry, who is a data visualization expert, and Jeff Hammerbacher, who's a former Facebook chief scientist and Cloudera co-founder. Then we'll look at cloud computing, which has become a data science enabler. So recall that we had this definition of data science. It combines hacking skills along with math and statistics knowledge, along with domain expertise. So let's start with Jim Gray's model. His model is that you capture data, you then curate that data, and then you communicate the results. So Ben Fry's model takes this down a level of granularity. Ben Fry starts by first acquiring data, then parsing that data, then filtering the data, mining the data for information, representing the results, refining the model, and then interacting with the results. Jeff Hammerbacher takes this even a level further. He starts first by identifying a problem, instrumenting the data sources, then collecting the data, and then preparing that data. And that involves integrating the data, transforming it, cleaning it, filtering it, and aggregating it. And then he builds a model. He then evaluates that model and then communicates the results. So in each of these cases, you can see how we start with a problem, we collect data, we clean that data, build a model, and then we communicate the results. Cloud computing is a key enabler of data science. Instead of going out and purchasing your own computers and then having to pay to operate those computers and maintain them, With cloud computing, you rent computers from a cloud computing provider. This allows you to reduce overall computing costs and in particular your operating costs for computing. Cloud computing enables you to perform data science on a massive scale because you can rent huge numbers of inexpensive computers, perform a problem exploration, and then shut down those computers and stop paying for them. Now, to make this possible, cloud computing providers are building massive data centers that have hundreds of thousands or even 1 million servers in them. Now, there are many challenges to building a data center that contains 1 million servers, including cooling, the building itself, and power, and how you actually organize the computers into modules. But people are performing research on exactly and engineering on how to build these things, and they are building these data centers. This is driving down the cost of cloud computing. So what does a data scientist do in practice? Well, first they start by digging around in data, trying to find interesting data to analyze. And that's why I have a picture here of some kids panning for gold, trying to find those little nuggets in a lot of dirt and dirty water. So the next step is that they have to clean and prepare that data, and then they hypothesize a model. So they think about what they think might be some interesting properties of the data and build a model. They then evaluate and interpret the results of that model, and oftentimes you don't get what you expected, and so you have to go back and collect more data and repeat this cycle of cleaning, preparing that data, hypothesizing a new model, or maybe a hybrid of your old and new or some composite model, and then evaluate and interpret the results from that, and then repeat and repeat and repeat until finally you have a model that you think gives you interesting, statistically significant results. And then you want to run that model at massive scale. And so this is where large-scale exploitation comes into play. Now, some of the topics for a data scientist include data acquisition, data preparation, analysis, data presentation, data products, and observation and experimentation. Now, what makes data science difficult? Many things. First, we have to overcome assumptions and making ad hoc explanations of data patterns. And this is just human nature. When we see something, we immediately see a pattern. And it's very hard for us to overcome that pattern that we saw and really understand, was that just something that, sort of like an optical illusion, or was it really a significant pattern? We also have to be very careful about we think it might be this because, those kinds of ad hoc explanations aren't scientifically valid. We also have to make sure we check and we check and we check again. We need to validate our models, validate the integrity of our data pipeline, and so on. So think about the Google Flu Trends results. Initially, they had a very accurate model, but over time, the model became very inaccurate. And this is because the underlying conditions changed. Flu stories appearing on Google News. They had to go back and revalidate their models and revalidate their data pipeline. And then they got great results again. We also have to be very careful about overgeneralizing. That is, taking a model and trying to apply it everywhere. Another hard thing for data science is communicating our results. How do you convey the results of your model to someone who's not a domain expert or who does not understand statistical methods? And related to this is we have to make sure that we use statistical tests correctly. Again, think about the caveat example with Facebook, where the researchers did not correctly apply statistical techniques. Another challenge is moving from a prototype model into something that you can run in production and can actually handle massive amounts of data and deliver results nearly instantaneously. And finally, data pipelines can be very complex, lots of moving parts from many different projects and sources. And so when something goes wrong, who do you ask for help? So let's focus on the hacking skills portion of what we think is data science. The big picture here is that we have many different data sources. Like here on the left, we have an application database, we have files, we have logs, and we want to get that into our data warehouse where we can perform data science and generate our data products, business intelligence, and analytics. This process of getting our raw data into our data warehouse is called ETL, or extract, transform, and load. The data acquisition preparation process, this ETL process, consists of extracting data from some sources, loading data into a sink, and transforming that data either at the source, sink, or in some staging area. Now, sources include things like files, databases, logs, websites, distributed file systems, and sinks include things like languages, evaluation and analysis environments, data stores, files, distributed file systems, and databases. Data acquisition and preparation consists of multiple phases. We have to characterize the data, then we have to clean the data, and then we have to integrate the data into our system and along with existing data that we have. We have to do this very efficiently in terms of space and time. That is, for transferring the data from one source or sink or preparation point to another. That process involves serializing and deserializing the data. When we read it from a file into memory, that's a very expensive operation. The same for writing it back to a file, and the same for reading it in from the network or writing it out to the network. Now, we create pipelines or workflows that consist of many stages. So here's a transformation pipeline that takes us from a data science file that contains a bunch of information to a mail message that contains a count of the characters, words, and lines in that file. And we do this using a set of Unix pipes and filters. So we start by concatenating the file. We pipe it into the word count program. The word count program determines the characters, the words, and the lines, and then we pipe that result into the mail program, which sends a message to someone with the subject word count. Now, if we're using this workflow more than once, we can schedule it, and that scheduling could either be done time-based or event-based. So every hour, we could run this pipeline, or we could only run the pipeline when someone updates the data science file. Another alternative is to use a publish-subscribe model to register interest. So for example, a Twitter feed is where we do something like that. You subscribe or follow someone, and then you only get updates when they make changes, when they post content. Now, recording the execution of a workflow is known as capturing its lineage or provenance. So given this workflow that I have here, anybody can now take this workflow and determine the words in a file and have that mailed to someone. Now, Spark's resilient distributed data sets capture this lineage for you automatically, and we'll learn more about that next week. So there are many impediments to collaboration. The diversity of tools and programming and scripting languages that we have makes it very hard to share. I use Python, you use Java. How do we share a Python script with someone who uses Java? It's not very easy to do that. Also, it's very difficult sometimes to find a script or a result that someone else has already computed. It's much simpler to just write the program from scratch. So an interesting question is, how could we fix this problem? Create a library or repository where we could store these scripts and store these results and make it very easy for people to search and find a particular script or result. But complicating this really is the view that most analysis work that we do is throwaway. We do it once and never again. But that's not really true. Oftentimes you'll perform an analysis, and then 6 months later you want to perform the same analysis to see how things have changed. What do? You write the script from scratch all over again. Not really a very good approach. Let's look at 4 data science roles. 2 are individual, a business person and programmer, and 2 are organizational, an enterprise and a web company. A business person has data sources that include things like web pages and Excel spreadsheets. Their ETL process is copy and paste between these documents. Their data warehouse is often a set of Excel spreadsheets. And for business intelligence and analytics, they use things like Excel functions, Excel charts, and Visual Basic. A programmer has data sources that include web scraping, web services APIs, Excel spreadsheets that are exported as comma-separated values, and database queries. Their ETL consists of lots of scripts like wget, curl, beautiful soup, and LXML. They store their data in flat files, and their business intelligence and analytics is tools like NumPy, Matplotlib, R, MATLAB, and Octave. The enterprise has data sources that include application databases, internet files, and application server log files. Their ETL is done using commercial products, and their data warehousing is also done using commercial products. And for business intelligence and analytics, they also use a variety of commercial and open source products. The web company has as data sources application databases, logs drawn from their services tier, and web crawl data. Their ETL is a set of open source tools like Apache's Flume, Squoop, Pig, Uzi, and Crunch projects. Their data warehouse is also open source projects from Apache, things like Hadoop, Hive, Spark, and Spark SQL. Their business intelligence and analytics is done using custom dashboards like Oracle Argus and Razorflow, or open source tools like R.